Hello everyone, welcome to my talk about how big macros really are. How many of you expect me to do some, showing some code? I just want to know. Okay, well, too bad. I'm not going to go in depth into the code. I'm really sorry. It's only 20 minutes and macros are really cool, but they're also a lot. There's a lot of things you can do with it, and also it's really experimental. So anything I would show you now, literally if you would try it out next week, it would probably already be completely different. So I'm just going to explain the few, which button? This one. The few things. I'm basically going to try to answer 3 questions. What are they? Why are they? When are they? I'm going to sort of answer those questions because they are really weird. I'll do a quick introduction for the people that don't know me. I'm Jochum from the Ploeg. I'm known as Wolvenrain on the internet. And I work as an open source engineer at Very Good Ventures. And while I'm doing my job, I also tend to maintain the Flame engine together with my Blue Fire people. So if you've never heard of me, you now have. And if you did hear of me, I'm really sorry. So why is this slide empty? That's a bit weird. Let me just click. I think I may have forgotten. Oh, wait, no, there's something on there. Oh, well, we know how big macros are. Sweet. That's the end. Sorry, I had to make that joke. I'm really good at making jokes, I guess. No, I'm not. You're probably not here for my dumb jokes, so fine. Let's see what's in store for us. We're going to discuss the following things. We're going to look at what macros are. We're going to look how we can create one. So there will be a tiny bit of code for those who, well, pretty much everyone raised their hands, so yay, we have a little bit of code. And we're going to split that up into 2 phases. We're going to talk about the phases, and we're going to talk about the diagnostic capabilities of a macro. And after that, we're also going to look at how we're going to, or when we could use a macro. And depending on if I go over time or if I have time left, we might also be able to answer some questions, if that's allowed. I might also just go over the 20 minutes. I mean, I'm the last talk here right now, so you guys have nothing else to do anyway, so... Oh wait, there's a panel, never mind. And after that, we have our little goodbye. So, what are macros? Well, I could explain it, and that's also the reason you guys are here, I guess. But we could also just look at the specification document, because people smarter than me wrote that, and they probably know more about macros. So let's just have a quick look. Okay, that's quite a bit of specification about one word. Let's have another look. Yeah, I pretty much understand it now, so it's fine. I can explain this. It's a bit too much for a lightning talk. In hindsight, I thought I could easily fit everything into a lightning talk. I should have submitted that as a full talk, but I'll do that next time, I promise. At that time, I hope the API is also stable, so maybe we can also have some more code. So let's just have a rundown of what macros are. It's a static meta-programming solution. That sounds really cool. That sounds awesome. But it basically just means it generates code while you're still writing code. So that's the static meta part. Like while you're programming, Dart is also trying to program with you. Like it's trying to help you out a little bit. And that basically means like you don't have to, yeah, it builds code as you write code. I should have clicked, my bad. But it also means you don't need to run any commands. Like people have probably used build runner before. You added those cute annotations and then run a build runner command and it generates a lot of stuff. You don't have to do that with macros. It's built into the Dart language, and it can augment everything you basically augment with your macros. So that's really cool again. It does not write to the disk either. So unlike build runner, where it just writes to a file, etc., this macros basically add to your code in like a hidden memory file in that sense. So it is there, you just don't see it, and it works. That's the magical part of it. And it can also provide diagnostics in your IDE. So that means that while you use a macro from a certain package, that macro can provide you with information. For instance, if you do something wrong, or if maybe something is deprecated, they can give a much clearer message on why it's deprecated, or maybe you should extend something or whatnot. We'll get to that in literally the next slide. So let's start by just defining a macro. And to do that, we basically have to define a class that has the special macro modifier. So I'm not sure how many of you were at the pub quiz yesterday, but it was one of the questions like, how many modifiers does Dart have for classes? And I'm pretty sure most of them forgot about macros, because it's behind a flag, so nobody has ever used it before, I guess. So it looks like this. I hope it's a bit visible on the screen, because it's got a lot smaller than I anticipated it. But that's basically how we do it. That's how we define a macro, and the constructor of a macro has to be constant, because it's statically added to the Dart analyzer server. So it can't ever change. You can't have like a mutable macro or whatever. That means that everything within a macro happens in 3 phases. It basically has the first phase, which is the typing phase. In the typing phase, the macro can add new types to your program. So you can define classes, type definitions, and enums. But it doesn't add in this phase like the implementation, the declaration of it. It can only add types that will also be exposed. So it can't do private classes or anything like that. You have the declaration phase for that. And this is the second phase, where a macro can declare functions, variables, and member of classes. So in the first phase, we can say we have a class X, but we don't know the members yet. They get declared in this phase, and in this phase, we can also define how that class function works, or like how the constructor works. And basically, anything you want to do in here, this phase is basically anything you ever need. It has all the features that we want. But there's a third phase, the definition phase. And in there, we can define the bodies of functions, so the real implementations. And we can even wrap existing methods or even constructors of our own written class that we just decorated with a macro to add or inject even more code. So let's say we want to have a validation macro, and we add it on like our data class. So like, okay, when the macro is there, we want to be able to like, when we create this instance of this data model, check if the property email is of the type email, and if it isn't, the constructor just fails. So we don't have to write any of that. The macro could generate and augment our existing code automatically for us. So those are the 3 phases. In this phase, you can also still declare new code, but it will never be public. It will never be exposed to the user. And with the user, I mean the person writing the class, like the data model that I just mentioned. We add the validation macro on top of it. And in this phase, if we would generate a new function or whatever, auto-completion would just say it doesn't exist. It does exist, but it will never be publicly available for anyone using that class. So let's apply those phases, because you guys look like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So this is the part where I just add a little bit more code to the slides. To add those phases, like it's really, like those phases don't mean anything, and we have a lot of different things we can add macros on. So thankfully, the Dart team provided us with a macro package. So that's what you see at the top there. You see an import packages macros / macros.dart, and those bring interfaces. They expose interfaces like the class type macro, the class declaration macro, and the class, oh, I did it twice, but the class definition macro was supposed to be there. And those are basically interfaces that expose build methods for each of the phase and the type. So the class is the type, and the second part of the word is basically the phase. And they expose basically a build method that you have to implement, and you get all the information you need in that build method. I on purposely did not add the build methods here, because those are like, that's the API that constantly changes, and that they are not entirely sure yet, like, is it enough information or do we want to hide more? So I kept it really simple. And obviously, there are a lot more type interfaces that they expose, ranging from classes to variables to top-level functions to even literally the library part that you can put at the top of the level. You can even add a macro on top of that and just generate whatever you want within that file. It's really cool. Anything can be augmented, and in every phase. So that was basically the bare bones of macros, and I won't go any deeper in that. I'm really sorry. And the reason for that is also because let's just go one back. The reason is also because it's constantly changing. Like the last 2 months, it has been pretty stable, but they don't guarantee anything. Like right now, if you would implement this and you would, for instance, create a file and write something to that file within one of those build methods that I mentioned, it will work. But according to the specification, it should not work. They created the specification, they created the implementation, and they don't align at all. So it's really, really experimental, but it's really cool. Diagnostics is the last really cool part of this whole macros thing. And in this phase, you can basically add information to the user in their IDE. And we have here a little build function. And in this function, as you can see, it basically does a lot of weird things. Like we get this class declaration that's called class, because with double Z's, because with the S it's apparently a keyword, so you can't use that. So they use double Z's, it's really weird. And we get a class type builder. And the first variable is our information, the thing that we just decorated with our macro. And it has things like the class name, the superclass, like what does it extend, or which classes does it implement. You can get all that typing information within your function to do extra logic on top of it. So in this case, if the identifier name of our superclass, aka does it extend something called parent class, everything is fine. Does it not do that, then we report to the IDE, to the user, hey, our schema class needs to extend parent class. So we have this parent class, and if you add this decorator, you're basically saying this class has to extend this schema or this parent class to be able to do something. So maybe we have in another phase we'll generate code that assumes that we're extending from this parent class. So this would just give us an error. It would not compile, etc. We have different severities that we can use, like warning and like information. And that allows you to basically control if, hey, is this code compilable, or do we just want to warn the user, or do we want to provide more information if they look at like the implementation? So that's how diagnostics basically work. Well, then the question is basically, so when do we use it? And to be honest, right now, you should not use it at all. You might have already like assumed that based on how negative I was about it. It's highly experimental and it's far from stable. But it will make our life easier once it goes out of that experimental phase. And the question, like I already mentioned, like this validation package, like this idea that you have like a class, like a data model, it has a few properties, and you add some decorators. Like if people have ever written TypeScript, you might know the class validation npm package. It does a similar thing. We can now also do that in Dart, but instead of it being a runtime thing where it does all the things, we can literally add it to the constructor, etc., and to just have that code in there. And then Dart can determine, do we need that code, yes or no? Like if you never construct this class, for instance, it would never keep it in the compiled binary. So like it doesn't really make it more complex, and these packages can do a lot of things for us. So this is one example that I came up with for like, oh, what could you use macros for? Another one is like an ORM. So I was talking about that schema has to extend something. Well, in this case, the example was basically like we have a schema of a certain table, and it has to extend this entity thing because the package requires that. So this is an ORM that would be able to model our class towards like a table and automatically generate select queries and whatnot. So this is really cool, right? This could theoretically work. Well, it already works. Like both of these are packages that I already made. I haven't published them yet because any third-party package that uses macros is unusable in your project. Especially if you use Visual Studio Code. They have a JSON file hidden away in the Visual Studio Code extension that only says only the JSON macro and another one are allowed. All the others are not going to work because they are afraid that there will be some cyclic dependency and RAM usage would go up and everything would crash. So they kind of just were like, okay, we are releasing this feature as experimental, but you can't really use it unless you have it all in the same workspace. So any third-party package that's published on popped up that, like the data class, I think it's called data class from Felix Angelov, you can't use it. You can use it. You will just have a lot of errors in your code. It would compile, but your IDE would tell you, hey, this function that you're mentioning, it doesn't exist. So highly experimental, but really cool, once again. We could also replace certain build runner-based packages, because how many of you thought that macros would replace build runner? Yeah, you're all wrong. Because we can't write to files. Like there are packages like barrel files, which generates a barrel file for you, really cool, but it has to write to the file system. Theoretically, you could have a library macro that does all the exports that the barrel file generates, but I don't know if that works. But the barrel file package would use, it needs to write to the file system, and macros are not allowed. They can do it right now, but according to the specification, they should not be able to. But also like the Flutter localization package, like it generates all the localization files for you, like a nice strongly typed API based on like input. You can't give any file input. You can't read from the file system either. There are a lot of things in the specification that are limiting you in what you can do. The only thing you really can do is do anything that you already have in the code. Like you can pass like a string, or you can pass an integer to like the constructor. But you can't pass a custom class, for instance. Like they are really limiting the things you can do with it, because in case people might abuse it. Like, for instance, if you use my package and I add a keylogger in my macro, like you won't see it because I'm hiding everything away in a macro. You don't see anything written to your file system, and I could do whatever. And if you didn't look at the source code, which you should always do, I could steal all your credentials, for instance. Sweet. So they're really trying to limit what is possible with macros, and that makes it not a good replacement for build runner. But there are packages that could be replaced with build runner. I just couldn't find any. Anyway, I don't know how much time I have left. I'm on 30 minutes apparently. Whoops. 30 seconds. Oh, well, perfect, because I'm recapping. So let's recap. Macros can augment your existing code. It can provide diagnostics to your IDE. So if something is wrong, you can tell the developer. And the API is extremely experimental. So long, and thanks for the macros. This was basically my talk.